Hi everyone, I'm going to show you how to create this hyper-realistic eye using only these materials. To start, I'm going to draw my outline using an H-grade graphite pencil. Here I'm using an H-grade pencil and rubbing it onto a piece of paper and then picking up the deposits with the blending stump. I then use this blending stump to help define some of the edges and soften the lines. Once I'm happy with my outline, I'm going to take an HB pencil and then rub a firm hog hair brush into the graphite deposits. I'm going to then use this to smooth out and add a little bit of tonal value to the iris of the eye. I'm taking a B-grade pencil now and I'm going to block in some of the darker areas of the iris. I then use the firm paintbrush to smooth out the darker values that I've just added and blend it into the iris. I then go back in with the B-grade pencil and block in more of the darker areas, adding a little bit more detail, and then blend it out with a blending stump. I then pick up more graphite with my blending stump and darken the inner corner of the eye as well as the waterline. And then I'm going to take my H pencil, add a little bit of a darker value underneath the upper eyelid, the waterline, and blend it out with my firm hog hair brush. I then use the brush dipped into 2B and 6B graphite to darken the lower eyelid. I'm now using my 6B graphite pencil to darken the areas of the iris and add a little bit more detail. I'm now going to use my Tombow Mono Zero eraser to add the highlights to the iris. Next, I'm using a B-grade pencil to add darker values to the inner tear duct and then smoothing it out with a blending stump. I'm also using the Kneaded eraser here to lift up some of the graphite that was a little too dark. Next, I'm going to use a sharp H-grade pencil to draw in the very tiny veins of the sclera. I then use a blending stump to soften the lines to blur them out, and then I'm going to use a Kneaded eraser to pick up some of the graphite that was a little bit too heavy in some areas. Next, I'm going to use a 6B pencil to darken the upper crease of the eyelid, and then I'm going to smooth it with the firm brush. Then I'm going to add a B-grade pencil below that and then smooth it again with the brush. Next, I'm going to add a layer of H-grade graphite to the upper eye area and smooth it out with a soft tissue. Again, with the H-grade pencil, I'm going to go in with another layer of graphite to darken the areas next to the creases of the eye and blend it out a little bit more. I feel it's really important to build up your tonal values slowly and in layers, smoothing it out in between each layer. I'm now using a B-grade pencil for the next layer and again smoothing it out with a soft tissue, and then again building another layer of B graphite and smoothing out with the tissue. I'm now using a 2B grade pencil to really focus on the areas next to the crease of the upper eye. This will help build up the illusion of roundness and depth in the eye. One thing I can't stress enough is to really avoid single harsh lines in your drawings. So instead of leaving these lines just dark straight lines, I really want to focus on blending out the areas around the dark line to make it look like there's an illusion of roundness in the fold. I'm going in with my 2-grade pencil now and again just darkening the areas next to the folds, adding a little bit more darker values and a little bit more of the shadow in the creases. After all the blending, you want to make sure you redefine that line again with the 6B grade pencil and then just slightly smooth out the edges with the blending stump. I'm taking my 2B pencil now and just darkening that area in the inner corner and then smoothing it out with my blending stump and brush. I'm now adding the H-grade pencil under the lower eye area and defining the wrinkles and adding a layer of graphite. I then take my soft tissue and smooth out the layer. Next, I'm using my Tombow eraser and adding these little tiny highlights and small white hairs in the inner corner of the eye. When it gets dirty, I just use the sanding block here and clean it off and then continue to add the highlights. I like to have this bevel shape using a blade It keeps it nice and sharp, and it's easy to add these really tiny fine hairs to the upper eye area. I then go over it with a paintbrush and a Q-tip to soften the lines. I'm using a dirty blending stump to add a subtle shadow to the eyebrow. I'm using a B-grade pencil here to roughly draw in where I want the lashes to be. Next, I'm taking a really sharp 6B grade pencil and I'm going over my lashes, being sure to really taper them at the end, clumping them together, overlapping them to make them look more realistic. So next I'm just going to take my firm paintbrush and just define that shadow underneath the eyebrow, and then I'm going to go in with my H grade pencil and I'm going to start defining the hairs in the eyebrow. When drawing eyebrows, it's really important to pay attention to the direction and flow of the hairs. You also want to make sure you're grouping them together and tapering them off at the end to make them look more realistic. Next, I'm using my paintbrush to smoothen and soften the layer. For the lower lashes, I'm using a sharp B-grade pencil. Next, I'm taking my 6B pencil and I'm adding eyeliner to the lower lash line, and then I'm smoothing it out with my firm paintbrush. I then use my blending stump to further blend the area, and then I use a Tombow eraser to add a little bit more highlight to the areas that needed it. I then sharpen my 6B pencil and I'm darkening the lashes just in the areas where they are a little thicker and more clumped together. So for the next layer of hairs for the eyebrows, I'm using a B-grade pencil just to go over those hairs, clump them together and darken them. And then I'm going to blend out the layer with my paintbrush. For this layer, I'm using a 2B pencil. I'm making sure it's really sharp. I continue to group and overlap the hairs, tapering them off at the end. And it's also important to have a sharp pencil to have some stray flyaway hairs away from the eyebrow to make it look a little more realistic. I'm now going in with my H grade pencil and just adding a little bit more value to the lower lid and also defining the wrinkles. So I'm just going to clean off my blending stump here, and I'm going to go over those lines that I just drew and I'm going to blur them out and soften them. Then I'm going to take a B grade pencil and I'm going to rub my brush into it and start to add a little bit more value under the eyelid. So I'm just taking a soft tissue to smooth out the area, and then I'm taking the Kneaded eraser to clean up a bit that got smudged. I'm now going in with my Tombow eraser to add a little bit of highlights to the lower lash line, and I'm cleaning it off regularly on my sanding block. One thing I couldn't stress enough is to really take your time with your details. Don't overlook this step. It's so important to be sure to add all these little details to help your drawing look more realistic. And lastly, I'm adding little tiny highlights to some of the hairs of the eyebrow using my Tombow eraser. And that's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to draw this eye using limited materials. I really wanted to let you guys know that you don't need a lot of fancy materials to create beautiful, realistic art. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Take care.